Well, what have we got here then, Bob? Well, actually, it could be the start of a new adventure. But what's it about then? Well, anyone who's watched my channel for any length of time will know that the last couple of years I've been on a bit of a quest to try and do some FPV flying with radio controlled planes. Done loads and loads of research. Have done a bit of FPV before, but with drones, and drones have a thing called return to home, which means when you lose sight of it you can press a button and it will just come back to you and sit above your head waiting to be landed. So I've done a bit of that, got some nice video footage from that. I've even done a bit of proper FPV, sat in the harness in my paraglider, where I've had some lovely flights, 8,000 feet in the French Alps, and I even had a close encounter with a light aircraft as I was approaching Lulworth Cove on the Dorset coast. Proper first person view. But I'm getting older, doing less and less of that stuff and more into radio controlled planes, and I think it'd be really good to be doing some proper FPV flying. As far as my tests so far go, I built this pink little cheapy conversion, my number 14 or 12 or whichever it was, done about 15 or 20 of those. Very lightweight with the idea of it being a nice FPV plane. Well, first off, I've realised that prop in the front is not much good for FPV, so converted it to pusher, and maiden of that was pretty awful, it was totally uncontrollable. Don't believe what it says online about the thrust angle. So modified it a bit, changed the thrust angle. This is the latest variation. Thrust angle now, despite what they say about it coming down here, much higher, much the same as my Bixler. And as you can see here, test flights I've made with this since changing the angle of attack there have been really good, flies really nicely. Biggest problem I've had though was I've been getting very poor results in my range tests for video transmission. So I figured out the most likely cause of the fact that I was getting poor video range with my little transmitters, because I'd rather foolishly mounted my little tiny receiver right on top of the radio control transmitter, which was causing a lot of interference with the signal. Did some other tests with my external monitor and the Bixler, and found that I actually had some good range in my transmitters. In my test with the Bixler a couple of weeks ago, when I was flying further away, still like visual line of sight with the Bixler, I looked away for just 3 or 4 seconds to check the video signal on the monitor on the ground, in other words away from my radio transmitter. Looking back, I realised I'd lost sight of the plane, which was a bit of a wake-up call for me for having the need for some kind of return to home if you're flying radio control plane FPV. And that thought was further compounded to me on my way home when I bumped into a friend of mine who flies FPV, and he actually said to me, you definitely need return to home if you're going to fly FPV with goggles. So that led me to loads of research into flight computers, and there are loads on the market, from moderately simple, in fact even the moderately simple ones aren't simple, to very complicated ones with masses of features. And that ultimately led me to the SpeedyBee Mini, which is this little tiny thing here. And the plan is to install it in my Bixler, which is a very stable, nice, easy flying plane. Plus it's about the only plane I've got that's big enough to even contemplate putting a flight controller in. And I can see why people that fly serious FPV use planes like the Atomic RC Dolphin, which have got a huge compartment, easy enough for you to install FPV gear, controllers and whatever. But this is what I've got, and that's what it's going to be. But getting back to the SpeedyBee, the pictures show you this beautiful little nav computer about so big, but this is actually what you receive in the packing. And it looks quite scary to me, but I've done loads of research. There's some really good videos on this, particularly by Andrew Newton and Painless 360, who are the masters in this stuff. And I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to crack it. And you use something called iNav, which is software on your computer, and even an app, so that you can program stuff like return to home, I'm hoping. Of course, I may have just thrown 50 quid away, because it was 30 odd plus £20 for the GPS that is essential, obviously. So that's the plan. First step, of course, is to assemble this and do some very fine soldering. I have done a fair bit of very fine soldering, because I made a video about soldering the tiny little FlySky receiver, but this is even more challenging. These pins are much closer together. So can't say I'm looking forward to it, but I'm preparing for it. I was going to buy some new tips, but I've even modified one of my soldering iron tips so that it's really very tiny. I don't use flux on the board, but the chap on Painless 360 recommends you use a flux pen to make sure all these are clean before you start. Plus I've even, after 20 or 30 years soldering, I've actually changed to a different kind of solder. So that's the plan: build and install a flight computer. I'll give you a little heads up, it has been a massive challenge, though I did manage to get the board assembled and soldered together. But as far as programming it goes and using iNav and getting it to work on that has been a huge challenge. But I'll talk more about that in part 2. So if you want to see that, why not hit the old subscribe button? And if you've learned anything from this video and enjoyed it, why not give it a like, because it helps my algorithms. But I'll stop waffling on. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. Hopefully I'll catch you all again later. Bye for now.